Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to be with you today. Hello, hello. Good to see everyone jumping in. I'm so glad to be here today. We're going to be speaking with Christine Samaru of the Breadfruit Collective. I'm super excited. I'm a huge fan of hers, all the great work that she's been doing. Hello, hello. Good to see everyone hop on. So just a little bit about me. My name is Anna, or Sonia, depending who you ask and when you ask me. I'm one of the co-creators here on Savouring the Indo-Caribbean. And I'm going to lower this. Hi everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, so my name is Anna, and I'm one of the co-creators here on Savouring the Indo-Caribbean. Today, we have a special guest. We've been doing these lives for a little bit now, and it's always so amazing to be in community with the amazing Indo-Caribbean community leaders. Christine will be here with us, and we're going to be talking about climate and gender justice, community solidarity, mental health, all the things. And I'm so happy to welcome Christine with us today. She's based in Guyana, so I am really committed on Savouring the Indo-Caribbean to have a diverse panel of people or guests on here to represent all the different facets of Indo-Caribbean. So I'm happy to have and so glad to have Christine join us today. So I'm going to try to find her. I'm going to do this. And this is a long time coming. Christine for so long now. We're basically best friends in my head. And hopefully that works. You just have to hope. Christine!
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So good to see you.
So good to see you too. I'm trying to make my Guyana flag show, but it's not working.
Yes. We'll lower it for next time.
Yes, I will. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here. And I feel I was just saying in my head we're best friends. And I feel like we are.
Yes, we can be best friends. I've actually never been to Canada, so if we're best friends, when I do plan my trip, I know who to contact.
Yes, and I will hold you to that because I think you definitely need to come
Yes.
visit Toronto. And I think when I come to Guyana, which I hope to come to soon. I'm just putting my volume up. I want to see you.
Yes,
So hopefully
definitely.
you'll want to see me.
Definitely. My apartment, it's open. You're welcome here. Stay as long
Everyone
as you
here?
like. I'm a homebody, so I don't know a lot of places, but we'll figure it out.
Well, now like you proclaimed this on the Instagram live, so I'm gonna hold you to it, and you're gonna see me soon. I don't doubt that. So, Christine, thank you
Yes,
so much
definitely.
for joining us today. I'm glad to be in community with you. I'm such a huge fan of the work that you've been doing with the Breadfruit Collective. Everything from sharing information on gender justice, menstruation, abortion, all the period drives that you've done, and recently you've co-created a short story for children, which we need to talk about. But I'm so glad you're here with us today, and we're going to be talking about a few different things. And before we get into it, though, I want to share a little bit of bio that you've sent me. So just for everyone listening who isn't familiar with the Breadfruit Collective, I highly recommend you follow Christine and the Breadfruit Collective because they do amazing work in Guyana. And Christine Simon was born and raised in Guyana. She moved to New York City in 2008. During that time, she studied at Iona College in the New York School. Christine focused her studies on climate justice and sustainability in Guyana and the Caribbean. She has a master's degree in environmental policy and sustainability management. In New York City, she worked as an educator at the Climate Museum and the Green Girls Program under City Parks Foundation. Previously, Christine interned with the Sierra Club and the Permanent Mission of the Maldives at the United Nations. In 2018, Christine decided to move back to Guyana to follow her dreams of doing environmental work in her country. Currently, she is a senior environmental officer at the Environmental Protection Agency. Christine describes the mission behind the Breadfruit Collective as being work that is related to her history, passion, and a way to honor her grandmother and women in her family who experienced various forms of gender-based violence. The work at the Breadfruit Collective aims to be intersectional, inclusive, intergenerational. Christine is a Climate Reality Project Fellow and a Green Faith Youth Fellow. Thank you for joining us today with all your brilliance, Christine.
Thank you so much for reading that.
Of course.
I really appreciate being here and just being in conversation with you. And I think when I first started Breadfruit, I followed your other page, Conscious Womaning. I think I'm saying that right. Yeah. And I was always so inspired. It was just like my daily inspiration. And for the longest time, I didn't know who was behind the page. And so I don't know how it happened, but I'm glad that we connected and we're able to do the live.
Yeah, well, I know I saw, and I'm a big follower. Conscious Womaning is a big follower of the Breadfruit Collective, and I'm glad that we can put face to all the things that we're doing. I'm not a big, I'm not front facing. I don't like to be front facing. So on Conscious Womaning, I'm not. It's just on here. I think it's important for us to have these discussions, and so I put my face forward on this platform. So with that, what's that?
I say I definitely agree with that. Like the being the face of something, it's a lot, especially when you're not used to it. And so I definitely relate to that so much. And this has definitely, the Breadfruit Collective has been my way of like putting myself out there, like mentally, physically, all the things. It's just pushing me out of my comfort zone. So I relate to that a lot.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because I feel like it could be really mentally strenuous to be the person behind such a big force like the Breadfruit Collective, but we'll get there. Before we do, though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Other than the bio, I know we're all more than just our little titles that we have, so tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, so I guess before we start a conversation, before it slips me, I know we're going to be talking a lot about, I just want to say the conversation can be triggering because we're talking about gender-based violence and mental health. And so I just want people to take care of themselves and understand that I'm also speaking from a place of privilege. And so I want to honor the people who do experience these forms of violence. And switching gears now, I'm Christine Samwaru, and I am someone who's really passionate about social justice in all its forms. And I understand that I'm coming from a place of privilege. I'm also a woman that has experienced many different forms of trauma. And I think I've committed my life to understanding my role in, I guess, the unfolding of the universe in a sense, because we're living in really critical times in terms of our planet. And so I think we all have a role to play in making it better than what we have inherited. And so I've committed my life to that work. And specifically, I've committed my life to doing work in Guyana and in the Caribbean because I feel as though we have a lot to say and we need people who are saying things that matter to us. And so I'm committed to partnership and building a network. And I guess on a fun side, I guess since I'm on Savouring Indo-Caribbean, I should probably talk about food a bit.
Yeah.
My favorite food is balanja choka and roti, and you're always making me hungry with all your food posts. And yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm also a parent to cats. I love cats, I love animals, and I love plants.
Oh, love it. What are your cats' names?
Oh my God, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Oh, no,
They're very.
Sure, that's okay.
I have a lot of cats, and for some reason they all have own names. So I have Orlando, they have Olive, Ovaltine, and then there's OP, and they're all rescue. They're all rescue.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that they all start with O. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the things that as I was getting to learn more about you digitally, I noticed that you you were born in Guyana, and then you went to the States to study, and presumably you spent a little bit of time there, and then you came back and you wanted to do some work in Guyana. So I'm really interested in that story. So, for example, what made you do your education in the U.S., and then what inspired you to kind of come back, and what was that contrast like for you?
Yeah, so the work that I do is really related to my history in a sense. So my dad, he actually lives in the States, and most of my dad's family live in the States. So growing up, my mom and my dad, they separated very young, and they got me like when they were like teenagers. So they were never married or anything. So it was always the case whereby I had to go to the United States. And so as a teen, it just worked out that I had to go. And even as a teen, I knew that I wanted to come back to Guyana. I wanted to do some kind of work here. So I lived there. I went to school. I went to grad school. I worked there, and I really enjoyed my time there. But it was always I always had a sense that my purpose was coming back here, and so I did. In 2018, I moved back here. So I've been here for 3 years now. And I can honestly say I don't regret this decision. I really enjoy my life in Guyana. I've been doing a lot of great work, and connecting to people is something that's really important to me. And I know it's kind of a bizarre thing to do, to like move to the States and then move back to Guyana. And I've heard all versions of stories that I'm making a big mistake. It's kind of unheard of, especially being a woman, to just decide to like, you're gonna pack your stuff up and just move back to Guyana, because people are leaving Guyana for the States. But I think it's just in terms of my journey, career wise, mental, emotionally wise, this is my path.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm so grateful that every day I can honestly say like I'm actually living the dream that I wanted to, these are the things I wanted to do, and I'm actually able to do it. So sometimes I think about our ancestors and I'm like, oh my God, they're probably so happy because here I am living out my dream. And that's probably never a thought that crossed their mind, because they didn't had a choice. They didn't had a choice to come here in the first place and work so hard. But here I am, able to kind of benefit from the sacrifices they made.
That is so beautiful, and I don't think you're crazy to go back to. So last night I was hungry, and so I made salt and rice last night because I just have salt and rice cravings. I don't know why. And so my dad was like, "Oh, you're eating salt and rice today again?" I was like, "Yeah, I just have this craving." I'm like, "Dad, like I wish I could just go back to Guyana and be a bush lady. Like you don't understand. Like that's my new dream is to go to Guyana and just live peacefully." So I don't think it's crazy at all. And so I honor that journey that journey that you've been on. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing, because it's really important work. It's really taxing work. And it takes a lot of courage to do the work that you're doing. So thank you. And of course, our ancestors are just fireworks all over the place for all the work that you're doing. So thank you. And I'm sure
Thank
a
you.
lot of people on here will can attest to how grateful we are for the work that you're doing. So with that
Thank
being
you so, so much.
You're welcome. And so with that being said, tell us a little bit more about the Breadfruit Collective. How did it come to be? Tell us a little bit more about it. I sort of did a summary, but tell us a little bit more about how it came about, what inspired you to start it. Tell us about the name, the logo, and what you do in terms of the work that you do.
Yes, I feel like this might take up the whole life, but
We have time.
I'm gonna summarize it. The Breadfruit Collective, it's like the thing that makes me so happy and so comfortable. And the aim is to be an organization that's connecting to gender and environmental justice in Guyana. So it's a collective, meaning that I welcome anyone with projects or programs or ideas that they may have that relates to gender and the environment in some ways. It started last year during the pandemic. However, I knew I wanted to start an organization in Guyana since I was in college. Like I knew I had this passion to come back. There was always this drive. It's like every time I introduced myself out in the States, it was always, Christine, I'm from Guyana and I'm doing this work because I want to go back to Guyana. That was always my introduction. So I knew I wanted to start something. I just didn't know how. And I've had this similar conversation, just feeling like not good enough or not being qualified enough to do something like that. But during the pandemic last year, like around April, May, I was having like a really difficult time at work. I was having a few family members had passed away from COVID and just natural causes as well. Um, and then on top of all of that, I was following the news about the murders and like killing of women as a result of their intimate partners, and it was like a constant thing. And I think because I was home and I was by myself, and all the news just, I kept taking it in, and it became too much in a sense. And so I was in a really, really dark space, and I didn't feel like there was a community of people that I can speak to about it, because when I tried, it was always like, well, this is a normal thing. This happens all the time. This is a normal thing. Like, this is just relationship. This is just a family issue. And I didn't think it was a normal thing, and I didn't want it to be a normal thing. So then I started the page, and I started it as a way for me to just kind of write how I was feeling. And for the longest time, it became a page that was just private. Like, I would just share my thoughts on it for myself. And then it turned into it became public, and then I realized like other persons were relating to what I was saying. And in a sense, like, although that made me happy in a sense that I was forming a community, it also made me really anxious, because I was like, oh my God, like now all these people are paying attention to me, and I never had that before in this sense, this public sense. So the I guess a year later, the Breadfruit Collective have definitely evolved. I feel a lot more confident with the work that I'm trying to do, and connecting and building a community has definitely helped me in so many ways. I'm able to like meet people like you, and so the mission right now is still the same. It's to continue to spread awareness and to engage people in the issues that affect women and girls and the environment from a Guyanese perspective.
Thank you so much for that. And you know what? A lot of the things that we've been working on in terms of passion have arose from this pandemic. And in many ways, the more and more I talk to people, the more it feels like in some ways it's been this blessing a little bit. And I honor space for those people who are still struggling. But I'm glad that the Breadfruit Collective emerged as one of those passion projects for you. And it takes a little bit of time, at least in my experience, to put yourself out there, especially when it's such sensitive work, and you feel like someone's seeing your soul, right? So that's a tough thing to do. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And one of the things that I've learned from you, actually, you take full credit for this, is is the idea and this concept that environmental issues and gender issues are far more connected than we think they are. And so I remember being on a live that you were speaking on, and you blew my mind. And you said, I'm paraphrasing, you said, the way that men treat the environment is similar to the way they treat women. And in that moment, my mind was blown, because then I started to be like, holy moly, like that is absolutely true. Like a man that's, emotionally, physically, mentally abusive isn't exactly like tending to his garden, right? Like that's just the fact of the matter. And so I love that you brought this connection to me, and I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit more, on how this intersection that you work at, environment and gender justice, come together.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so happy to hear that I said something and it stayed with you. It makes me so happy. Just sometimes I think I'm a very anxious speaker, and I guess we're always so critical of ourselves in so many ways. But just thank you so much for that. That like made my whole week.
Oh,
But yeah, so there is a field of thought, like the ecofeminist perspective, and it's basically emerging, and it speaks about the connection between women and the way we treat women and the way we treat the earth. And so we have a society that's embedded in this capitalistic patriarchal sense. And so all the issues that we currently face from a climate change perspective, we can directly see the thing happening to our women and to I guess marginalized groups. And so to make it a little bit simpler, when we talk about the environment and gender, there is a deep connection to the two. When you talk about environmental disasters, for example, when it happens, women are actually the most vulnerable and they're most likely to be killed when a disaster happens. And it's most likely because women makes up the majority of the world's poor. And when you think about it, when natural disasters happen, we're as women, we're not taught how to like climb and swim and like these kinds of ways to like escape and like find help. Like we're not normally taught these things. So when a disaster happens, it's most likely to kill us. And even beyond that, if we're going to talk about like refugees and if we're talking about climate change, refugees as a result of climate change impact their homeland. Like when these women and girls like go to shelters, these shelters might not even be safe for them. And so that creates a whole other issue about trafficking of women and all sorts of things. Additionally, like women, although we are part of the workforce, we are usually not, we know this, we're not usually not paid equally. And so women that works in like agriculture sectors, when climate change disaster happens, and so if there's an effect on their crops, again, they're going to be suffering. And most likely, because we don't get paid equally, we are reliant on our male counterpart. And so it makes sense why domestic violence rates might be high. And so it's not as simple as telling a woman, like, you can just leave and just find a job, because that might not be an option at all. Like, they might not be able to find a job because there is no job. And so the issues are so connected that unless we understand the connection, I don't think that we can actually achieve the sustainable goals that we're trying to achieve. They're so connected that if we do acknowledge the connection, we will be able to create an environment that is sustainable, that is safe, that is equitable.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I can listen to you speak about this connection all day, because the reason why it rings a bell to me especially too is because I'm thinking about domestic violence as a form of oppression for women. And when we think about women and their roles within the environment, they're custodials of this earth most of the time, right? And so, what
Yeah.
impact does abuse on a woman affect how she relates to the earth, how she takes on the responsibility um, for example, tending to her children and nutrition, and all of these things play a big role, and they interrelate with each other, and they're so entangled when you really take some time to think about it, right? Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And it.
Yeah, definitely. And so in my day-to-day job, I do project management. So we have various projects that deals with biodiversity. And one of the things I was thinking about was one aspect of the job. I guess another way to simplify the connection between the environment and women, and unless we take an intersectional approach, we wouldn't get the outcome that we're looking for. Like when we have these projects, we want women to be involved, but sometimes it's not as easy as just inviting a woman to come to your meeting and for them to care about the issue. You really have to understand their livelihood and the things that might prevent them from like sharing their opinions and sharing their feedback. And I think as women, like as you rightfully say, like we are custodians of the environment. We understand. We're the ones taking care of the family, so we understand when there's an issue with crops and with water and so forth. And in Guyana, we in Georgetown, we're very lucky that we are not so reliant on, like, say for example, I'm going to tend to crops, but in other places, like the women are the ones who are tending to the crops, and so they have a direct connection to the environment.
Yeah, and I watched Coastland. by, I forget his last name,
Alex,
first name,
uh,
but what was it?
Alex Arjun.
Yes, Alex Arjun, and it speaks to various climate issues in Guyana. And one of it was this displacement of villages and people, just because of the way that, the mangroves, the depletion of mangroves, and it affects like villages of people and the displacement of people. And in the documentary itself, like some of those were women, and so imagine like a lot of those women that are affected by some of these climate issues, them and their families have to become displaced and move, and sometimes that burden to figure that out is on the women. And so
Yeah.
it's so crazy how related it is, and I thank you so much for bringing that to our attention on a regular basis, because I don't think we make this connection as often as we should. So I thank you so much for doing that work, and to bring it over to Savoring here, and for all the people here to understand, because we're all about food here too, and it's like, how do we food is a essential part of the environment. Agriculture is so connected, and so I'm glad that we're all bringing this up. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about too is the climate aspect of the work that you do. And one of the things that you recently created was an ebook for children. And so this blew my mind. And so I sent it to everybody that I could send it to. And it's called and it's called The Sprouts and the Mystery of the Flood. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about this and how this project came to be.
Yeah, so this book, it makes all of us so happy. So I must say it's a collaboration between the Breadfruit Collective and an amazing youth organization here in Guyana. They're called the Guyana Youth Environmental Network. And so if anyone is joining, please follow them. They're a group of young people who are just committed to this work. And yes, it's a partnership between the two groups. And basically, we wanted to create a book that for children specifically, but we wanted to create it in a way that it can be used by children and adults alike, to be inspired and take actions for the environment, and to understand that little things that you do create a ripple effect and do have an impact on the environment. And so we are currently in a society that you can't turn on the news without hearing about a natural disaster that it's related to climate change. And in Guyana, we've experienced recent flooding, extreme flooding recently, and flooding, it's a continuous thing that happens. So we wanted to create something that's very localized, something that's relatable to children, but also adults, and they can read it and be inspired and take action. And yeah, it came out in the form of a book. It's currently as an ebook, and if you check the link in the bio, it's accessible for free. And we are really excited to put that out there. It's the first book for all of us, and it's been a labor of love to say the least, because we've been working tirelessly for the last 6 months on this book, and we're so very happy with all the feedback that we've received so far on it. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Of course, and if it's not already, it will be a link in our bio as well. So please check that out. It's on my to read list. I know it's for children, but I'm gonna definitely read it. Of course, like I can't not read it. So
Definitely. There is some Guyanese Creole in there,
yeah,
and it's funny. I might be biased, but I think it's really funny. There's some
love
funny
it,
items,
love
and
it.
also lots of educational opportunities.
Good. So tell us a little bit more about ways people can support the Breadfruit Collective. Like, what would you say is like some of the ways that people listening, some of the supporters here on Savoring the Indo-Caribbean, how can they support you and your work?
Yeah, so I guess we just talked about the book. So the most urgent thing right now is to read the book and share feedback, and just like keep spreading it to everybody, because again, we did the book completely voluntarily. And so for us, your feedback means everything to us. So that's one of the easy way. Another way, I think, is just interacting with the page and with me. I'm the person behind the Breadfruit Collective, and just reaching out and sharing ideas and partnerships, and I'm always open to conversation and learning and growing and building the network. I think as a Guyanese-based organization, one of the things that's really important for me is highlighting people in the Caribbean that's doing this work. And so centering our voices is something that's really, really important to me. And I always ask persons, although we are all in this community of being Indo-Caribbean, I always ask for persons to create space whereby persons who are facing the issues or who are at the forefront of the issues be able to speak on their perspective. And so with the Breadfruit Collective, there's a number of projects that I want to roll out that continues to talk about mental health and issues women face. Um, but again, it takes a lot. And so honestly, building a network is something that I think would help. And again, if somebody's listening in and they want to reach out, feel free to do so. You have a project. The Breadfruit Collective is meant to be a network. So it's meant to be a space that co-creates ideas. And although we're in this virtual environment, I think there's still so much that can be done. And one of the other things about the book that I should mention, we wrote the book in 6 months and it was all virtual. Like some of us never met. So there's a lot that can be done in this virtual space, and I'm always inspired and motivated to get work done, especially if it relates to the Caribbean and Guyana specifically. So if you're someone that's interested in building a connection, definitely reach out.
Thank you. And one of the things you touched on there that I wanted to talk to you about too is this idea of community solidarity. One of the things that I've also learned from you is that was straight into my face was this, this idea of how, it's not about charity, it's about solidarity, and that phrase really struck with me. There were a lot of people, speaking about this, and so it took me some time to kind of digest it in the sense that, what does that really mean as a person who wants to be an active in engagement with some of these issues, like far reacher than just the environment, anti-Black racism, like all of these social issues that are coming up, is how do we be in solidarity with the people doing tough work, and how can we be allies in a meaningful way? So I guess one of the questions that I have for you, and you touched on it, was, there are a lot of organizations in and around Canada, US, that represent the Indo-Caribbean identity or Indo-Caribbean culture. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned is ensuring that we create spaces for people all across the diaspora and in the Caribbean to speak and to have their voices be heard and to speak to the people who are most affected by some of the issues that we're talking about. And so I wanted to know from you, say you are an Indo-Caribbean organization, you're based out in the US or Canada, like what recommendations would you have for us in terms of ensuring that we sort of, we are in solidarity with you?
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And that's such an important question. And I'm always about transparency and honesty. And I must say, like, I've had a number of back and forth between people who have the best intentions, but in terms of communicating, we've had a roadblock. And for me, what I can say in terms of community solidarity, even for me speaking on this topic, because I'm somebody that lived abroad and then moved back to Guyana, I'm somebody that's speaking from a lot of privilege. And so although somebody overseas in Canada or in the States, or, although you're there and you're from a Guyanese heritage or you were born in Guyana, you still have so much privilege than somebody that lives here. And so the most important thing that you can do is understand your privilege and acknowledge it, and then acknowledge the intersectionality of the issues that people in the Caribbean face. It's not, your parents might say something based on their lived experience of being in the country, but it might not be the reality of what's happening right now. So I think the thing that you as a person that can do is reach out to people that live here and have a conversation, ask them, like, find out what's going on. And in terms of the assumption, you kind of have to unlearn a lot of things. And for me, I would say for persons to build a network of people who are in the Caribbean, if you are doing this work, please, please, please center the people who are doing it in the country as well. Do not use your platform to co-opt our stories, because I've seen that happen so much. And it breaks my heart every time, because an organization in the US or in Canada might be speaking about an issue as, oh my God, can you believe the suicide rates in Guyana are so high? Like, why isn't anything being done? And I'm sitting here like, but things are being done, and there are people on the ground here doing the work. If you had taken time out, you would have understand that they are doing work. And so instead of having a post like that, for example, that's just an example, you can maybe connect with the person that's actually doing the work to hear the actual reality of what's happening on the ground. So for me, it's all about building that connection, understanding the privilege that a person may have, and then centering the people who are doing the work. I think it's easy for us to all Google things about whatever region of the world we want to talk about and put it in a post and share it. But the hard work comes in when you actually have to engage with people who are doing the work and understand that the issue is a lot more complex than we may think it is.
And you know, one of the things that strikes me that you were mentioning is this critical lens that we have sometimes as people who are abroad. And you know, we got to check ourselves a lot on that, because we would have been taught certain things about, you know, our parents would have left Guyana or left certain places, and they would have brought over their biases, and they would have, you know, entrenched that on us. And we need to be really delicate about how we perceive people, you know, across the diaspora, including in the Caribbean, and the way we talk about, you know, what life is like for people in Guyana, what are the issues that they face in Guyana and Trinidad and all the other places. And, you know, I think if we would be, we wouldn't be doing anybody any justice to read stats and to like share stats without addressing some of these some of the work, the real work that's been going on. And so that's why I think it's really great for me, at least as a person, to interact with you and to see the work that you've been doing. There are many other organizations across the Caribbean that do great work that we follow, and I'll make a post on some of these organizations as well. A lot of them actually I found from you, Christine. And so one of the things that if anybody like, listen, you, it's really hard, I'm not going to lie. It's just because of the way, you know, SEO is set up, and it's really easy for us to find organizations here in Canada, and across the states. Like, you have to do really diligent work if you want to find people that are doing work in the Caribbean. If you are here, I think it would be easier if we were in Guyana to find some of these organizations, but you got to be smart about it. So one of the things that I've done is I've literally gone on Christine's page and see who she follows. Like, really, like, that is, I think that's brilliant. Isn't that?
Oh, thank you so much. I know, so I do know that persons mean well in the space, right? We mean well, and we are doing the work that's so difficult. But I think for all of us, it's a learning experience, because we don't want to create a space whereby we're replicating the things that we're trying to avoid. Like, we don't want to replicate the patriarchal thinking and the systematic thinking whereby we're being exclusive, um, and we're not including the voice that's most important in the work that we're trying to do. So I think the easiest thing that we can do is listen and create a space whereby we're open to having a conversation about the issues. And if somebody call you out, especially somebody that's experiencing the issue firsthand, if they call you out, acknowledge it and don't take offense to it. Just have a conversation and have dialogue and continue to understand that we're all growing and we're all like unlearning certain practices. And I thank you so much for following the page. For me, the important thing is just centering our voices in the Caribbean, because we're already so marginalized and our stories are not always being told. And there's so much that we have to deal with living in the Caribbean. So the most that you can do is build that network and center us. And I'm sure, like from my experience, when you collaborate on work, the work becomes so much better.
Yeah, especially when you have diverse thinking. And one of the things that we know is that there's diversity in just location and lived experience, right? Your lived experience is different from mine, different from, everyone else. And so I want to read a comment too that Stephanie says here. It says, yes, give credit where credit is due. It is judging rather than doing the research and helping the cause. Yeah, exactly. And, I think one of the things too in Canada and in North America, we think that, helping is like our financial aid, right? And so it's really more than that, right? It's really about engaging, it's really about learning, it's about listening, it's all the things that you've said. And so I just want to underscore this idea of charity being this exclusive means of financial aid, where it needs to be more than that. And so I thank you so much, Christine, for having this conversation with me, because I think it's really important, especially as Savouring is based out here in Toronto. And one of the things that we learned too, it's like I'm Guyanese, so this is not about like a social issue or whatever the case may be, but like, we want this space to be an inclusive spot as well, right? And so how do we bring in foods from all sorts of places in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, in Suriname, and and it's like finding little ways to bring diversity and inclusion in whatever space you show up in, right? And so even if you're just talking about food, I think it is
Food is really important, and it's not just about food. Like food and climate change. That's a whole other conversation that I'm ready for anytime you're ready.
yes.
Because our traditional food and the way it came about, there's a lot of colonial, historical practices on how we develop this cuisine that we have, and so climate change is something that threatens that. And plants as a whole, they are a way for us to fight their solution to climate change. So, and our traditional food and the way we live, it's sustainable in the natural aspect of it. I guess in a way, the traditional aspect, we are people that live sustainably. So yeah, there's a lot of knowledge in food, and I'm glad that you have this platform that celebrates it.
Yes, and you keep blowing my mind, right? Because yes, climate change just has to do with food, and as much as we like to put our little but dal, rice, and bhaji reels, like we can. So I'm going to take you up on that offer, and we will talk about how we can collaborate on something regarding climate change and food. And a lot of the research that we've been doing it really does put things into my face around the colonial history of some of our foods and how it's been lost. And so I know that plants and culture is in here too, and their page is absolutely fantastic. I love plants and culture. If anybody is here, make sure you do follow Plant and Culture. They have taught me so much about all of these different herbs and plants and their histories, and so that's a wonderful page as well. So thank you, Plants and Culture, for being here. Stephanie said,
yes, I was gonna say we should have Plants and Culture, Savouring in the Caribbean, Breadfruit Collective. That's the next,
oh, okay.
next collaboration.
Okay.
Because Alex is amazing.
Right.
Shout out to Alex.
We're gonna talk about it. That's exciting. You just made me super excited. Okay. Stephanie says, learning and educating. I'm actually bringing this social issues to awareness in my own classroom. So Steph is a friend of mine, and she's a teacher. You don't need to have a classroom to educate. Discussions like these open the doors to these topics. Yeah, exactly, Steph. Thank you for bringing that up. And so that's one of the things too, I think is super cool around, as you were mentioning earlier, a lot of us are learning and unlearning some of the things that have sort of put a block in our identity and our connection with our history and our Indo-Caribbean culture. And so a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I know are really doing this work to kind of reconnect to our roots. And one of the things that I've seen happening is how we're bringing this connection back into our everyday lives through work, through teaching, through, you know, the corporate spaces. And so, you know, there's also that work going on too with certain people that are, you know, really trying to bring some representation in the spaces that they're in day to day. So thank you for that, Steph, because that's a really important point as well. So I'm going to remind myself to connect with you and Plants and Culture, and we'll do something. We'll do something. So with that being said, a lot of the topics that we discuss and that you discuss on your page, and you were mentioning earlier too around, you know, earlier in the pandemic, some of the feelings that you were having, the experiences that you were having, and one of the things that, you know, is not really talked about in our culture is mental health. So first of all, I was wondering if you would be open to letting us know how you take care of yourself. Like, how did you manage this pandemic? How did you navigate this space, and how do you continue to take care of yourself, because you do really, really tough work?
Yes, it's definitely been, and I think I can say that every day is different for me, and I'm open to talking about I'm so stuck with climate change. Yes, I'm open to talking about climate change, but also
Yes, we
mental
talk about
health.
climate change all the time.
Mental mental health is something that it's something that, you know, affects me. I'm somebody that I take medication for my mental health, and I try to be as open as possible with how I feel, and you know, just having that conversation with people. Mental health for me is everything. It depends on my physical, it tells on my physical health. If my mental health isn't, if I'm not taking care of my mental health, I'm going to suffer physically. And so because of my history, I've I've grown up in a very like traumatic environment. There was a lot of domestic violence. And I think during the pandemic, it made me a lot braver in talking about these issues because again, I was suffering so much that I needed to find a way to get it out. And for me, how I manage my mental health, I am privileged enough to have a therapist, to have somebody to talk to and, you know, be open with. And I think that's not something that Guyanese in Guyana, although we have such high statistics of suicide rates and gender-based and intimate partner violence, that's not a service that many people are able to afford. And I'm very grateful that I'm able to access that resource. Additionally, I think setting boundaries has been a really important thing for me. Setting boundaries with the page and just the interaction with the kind of people I interact with on the page, because again, people mean well. They might mean well, but not all of their, I guess, all the things might not align with what I want out of the Breadfruit Collective. So setting boundaries and being okay with saying no. And the other thing I think is just being present and being in the moment. I've been diagnosed with both anxiety and depression, so it's easy for me to like go into a spiral and to talk and to think all the negative things that the entire world has and think that I'm not making an impact. It's easy to fall into that spiral, but being present and engaging in practices like taking the sacred pause and understand that things like meditation and exercising, those are all things that are really, really useful. And I think for me to continue doing the work and not burn myself out, I think it's really important to like put the self-care and the mindfulness aspect into the work. And so anyone that comes into the Breadfruit Collective as a collaborator, as somebody that's just want to get work done, I always tell them that first and foremost, like always prioritize your own mental health and make sure that you're creating space for yourself. Even though you might want to do this work, just understand that I want you to take care of yourself first.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing with us, you know, your journey. And I think one of the things is been really important in this pandemic is it really brought to light how much we don't take care of ourselves. I don't know if you had that experience where you were like, "Holy, like this is actually what it takes for me to take care of myself." How come one, no one ever taught me that? And two, this is actually a lot of work to do, and you have to take time and space out of your day. And if it makes sense to put it in a to-do list as it does with certain people, it's like it was really a big eye-opening experience for me to realize the amount of care we weren't taught, and how much care we actually need, and so thank you so much for bringing that up. I know one of the things that's important for me is like a daily practice. And I'm wondering from you, do you have a daily practice that you're sort of like, it's your time. It's your time to be with yourself.
Yeah, I like what you said about us not being taught how to take care of ourselves. And that's something like as an adult now, like having to learn that it is hard. It is hard to build habits. And so yeah, it's okay to struggle with it. For me, my daily practice, I'm really cognizant of the food that I eat. And exercising for me is something that I really prioritize and make time for. It's something that I look forward to. I feel a lot better and happier. Journaling is also something that's it's like my go-to. Before I was able to afford therapy, journaling and just like listening to podcasts, those were the things that I look forward to doing, and those were the things that helped me in feeling better and feeling a bit more connected to myself.
And I think one of the things that makes it really great for you to speak on this, Christine, is that I don't think that a lot of people realize how many of us are really struggling, and how many of us really are trying to figure it out. And so one of the things that's important for me as a person is to bring these conversations to the forefront. And before we conclude, I wanted to ask you if there's anything else you wanted to share about climate change, because I know that's one of your favorite your favorite topics. Mental health, community solidarity, like anything else you wanna mention, you want to talk about.
Thank you so much for this space. And what I can say, yes, these topics are always in my head. I can find anybody, even the youngest child, and start talking about climate change. What I can say is the issues that we're facing right now in 2021, they're so overwhelming. I can tell you, they're so overwhelming. And I would say to a person that's interested in getting into this in any kind of social justice work is first to care yourself and understand that whatever little you're doing, even if it's just having a conversation, that's enough, or that's a good starting place. And so in order for us to keep the work going, we have to take care of ourselves, and we also need everybody to act in some capacity. We've reached a place whereby, unfortunately, is not an issue for the future generation. It's an issue that we have to tackle, and the burden is on us. It's on our generation, and we're already seeing the effects of it. It plays out. COVID-19, it's a way for us to like open our eyes, because this is an issue that's connected to so many different social justice issues: climate change, biodiversity loss, the inequality that exists. So many people are out of jobs, kids are out of school. So I think understanding the issue that we have to deal with, it's so complex, but understand your role in it, and the things that you're doing is enough, and continue to build community and build network, and continue to talk about the issues that you're passionate about.
Thank you so much, Christine. And I feel like I can talk to you forever, but I also know I don't think this is going to be the last time. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being you. Okay. Thank you for taking care of
Thank you.
yourself, Christine, because, you're a light worker in this space. And so thank you for taking care of yourself, and for showing up the way that you do every day on digitally. And I'm sure people who are around you you're just a light. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay. And thank you so much for
Thank you so
joining us.
much for having me.
Of
Thank you
course.
so much for having me. And thank you for your work, because you're also involved in so much. And I'm so grateful that we're able to connect. And like you said, this is not going to be the last time. We're going to have so many different conversations. But thank you for being so thoughtful and organized, I really appreciate you as a person, and I hope one day we get to meet in person.
Yeah, I'm taking you up on your offer when I come to Guyana, so don't you forget that as well.
And when I come to Canada, I have a friend. Well, actually, I have a best friend.
You
I
have
have
a
a
best
best
friend. Yeah,
friend.
it's true. It's true. So I hope that you do make it over here. I'm going to make it over to Guyana for sure. And so we'll talk again. I would love to collaborate with you. And so we'll talk about that as well. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.